My contribution to the NEH Cares grant is the transcription of Benjamin Franklin's ledgers into a computer-readable dataset. The APS owns many of Franklin's ledgers, which document the period of Franklin's life when he was building his printing business. These ledgers are a wealth of information, not just about Franklin, but also his wife Deborah and other Philadelphians. The ledgers are difficult to read and use. However, their structure, similar to a data table in which there's an underlying system, makes them an intriguing possibility for scholars who are interested in using big data computational tools in the humanities. The Franklin Ledgers project can inform a number of scholarly pursuits, but part of the reason why it was included in the NEH Cares grant is that it touches on a number of scientific discoveries along with 18th century Philadelphians' interest in science. As the documents were transcribed into tabular data sets, one can easily find out what science-related materials were purchased in the shop, as well as who bought them. Additionally, as the digital objects are connected to individual entries, scholars can easily pull up an image of the original document and compare it to the transcription. As the data set is sortable and includes a controlled vocabulary, researchers can also easily isolate certain books or other materials sold in the shop. What you are seeing on your screen are two examples of the capabilities of the data sets related to scientific inquiry and interest. The top entry shows the purchase of a telescope by Joseph Brightnall, whereas in the bottom entry, we see the data set sorted by the controlled vocabulary, revealing who purchased Party's geometry. To demonstrate the efficacy of the transcription of the ledgers, I want to highlight a specific portion of the account books where we see Franklin, in part, participating in the Republic of Letters through the manufacturing of paper in North America. Paper was a primary vehicle of knowledge during this period, yet in Franklin's time, paper was a scarce resource, especially in the colonies. There was no paper mill in the colonies until William Rittenhouse immigrated to Philadelphia in the 1690s. When Franklin arrived in Philadelphia in the early 1720s, the Rittenhouse family were still the only paper makers in North America. Paper was essential for forming the Republic of Letters and for Franklin's business. Most of his ventures, printing the news, books, advertisements, as well as wrapping shop purchases, required paper. Additionally, a large portion of the purchases in the shop were for paper in a vast variety of types. As you can see on your screen, paper, which is in the olive green portion, was one of the most commonly purchased items in the shop. And this visualization will be interactive in the NEH Cares site. Making paper in the 18th century was a community effort. Before the 19th century, paper was not made of pulp, but rather from rags. These rags were purchased from the community, or less ideally, bought wholesale from traders. Philadelphians were encouraged to save and sell their rags directly by Franklin in the Pennsylvania Gazette, beginning in 1734. Financial compensation for rags was necessary because the fabric needed to make paper, linen, and cotton was a precious resource. Only when fabric was impossible to mend or be reused would families sell their rags to peddlers or directly to the Franklins, making somewhere between 1 to 1.5 shillings per pound, depending on the quality and type of fabric. Between late 1739 and 1745, James Quest brought over 1,000 pounds of rags to the Franklins, making over 50 pounds total in credit towards his account. Although the accounts do not reveal the source for all of the scrap fabric, the Franklins obtained and sold over 180,000 pounds of rags in the 1730s and 1740s. The rags were bought almost entirely by paper makers who had established or were establishing paper mills in Philadelphia and elsewhere. Thomas Wilcox, a papermaker who made pasteboard and experimented in paper money techniques, bought the most fabric scraps from the Franklins in total. And as seen in this visualization, Wilcox, whose purchases are indicated through the pink section of each bar, but between 4,000 and 7,500 pounds of rags per year. After the rags were purchased in Franklin's shop, the papermakers moved them to their mills. The mills were far from Franklin's business as they required clean water. That meant moving thousands of pounds of rags to distances as far as Virginia. Over 4.5 tons were moved from Franklin's shop to the Wissahickon Creek in 2 years. On average, about 1,300 pounds of rags were moved per transaction, which is about the weight of 1.5 grand pianos. Once at the mills, the rags were made into paper and then sold to the Franklins. The Franklins used this paper to print books and other materials, some of which contributed to the production of scientific knowledge. They also sold paper to their customers, enabling them to communicate with others across vast distances. And in this visualization, we see that the Franklins sold many different types of paper in their shop over the years. The visualizations I've just discussed are only an example of what can be done with the transcribed account books. The transcription provides a rich source of information for scholars in a wide variety of fields. Consequently, the digitization and transcription of Franklin's accounts enhances scholarly inquiry into 18th century scientific pursuits and is a 21st century fulfillment of APS's mission to promote useful knowledge. Thank you.